I'm going to pop the cucumber out in three, two, one. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Blokes podcast. Ryan Hassan from the Centre for Healing here, joined as always by Nico, the Sultan of Steel, Cucumber Man Sutherland from Myndfit. Nico, how are you?
Oh, I am ready to eject this cucumber.
Ready to eject it?
I am.
We have a special guest on today. I'm very, very excited to introduce to the listeners. And Nico,
Is
I don't
that
know
all
how
the time I get? Is that all the time I get?
you're
Is
not
that
going to
just
speak for the rest of the show.
that? Okay, cool. Good chat.
We did a,
Hit the showers.
I did a poll, and yeah, people are sick of you.
What was it? Did you ask yourself?
I was having a shower. I was having a shower before we jumped on this morning, and I looked at myself in the mirror, and I was nude, and I'm like, I don't need Nick. Look at me, I'm fantastic.
Fair play. Fair play.
No, Nick, I love you. Please stay.
Okay then. And we do have a guest, and I'm excited because I get to do all the talking today, and you just get to shut your pie hole for once.
Yeah, well, let me introduce first, then I'll shut my pie hole. So we have all the way from the other side of the planet, pretty much. We have Matthew McNutt, a good friend of mine, coming from the Midwest of the US and A. What are you laughing at?
Is he English? Is he English? Matthew McNutt. Matthew McNutt. Is he in a metanoia?
No, what's your middle name, Matthew? Is it Earl?
It is.
It sounds British, doesn't it? Matthew Earl McNutt.
Earl McNutt.
The Earl of Kansas.
I'm Scottish on both sides.
Scottish on both sides.
Right,
there you
brother.
go.
All right. Yeah.
Mate, welcome. It's an absolute pleasure to have you.
It's an honor to be on here.
Yeah, well, you're in the singlet, mate. We're down here in Melbourne where it's about 10 degrees Celsius. You're at about 42 over there in Kansas, middle of summer, yeah?
Yeah, 108 for all you American folk listening.
There you go. What about our Iceland audience, Nick? What do they do? Are they Celsius or Fahrenheit people?
I'd say they're Celsius. Most of the world's Celsius. It's just the Americans that tend to still be a little bit
Still do the
different
inches
on
and
feet, yards.
Yeah.
We still
This
say
is an interesting
noon.
one. But
Who says
golf's
midday?
Golf's an interesting one in Australia because we say the measurements in meters, but then we've got a 3-foot putt. So we're still mixing them.
Yeah, that's true.
Why don't you just say a yard?
A what?
1 yard is.
It's already too complicated. It's too early in the morning over here, mate. He's got Des and Troy out though. For those that aren't going to watch this on the YouTubes, Matty's pulled up and he's already obviously done about 20 push-ups before jumping on the camera today. He's got Des and Troy out, sun's out, guns out. So you're looking good, buddy.
Oh my Lord.
There it is.
Oh God, Jesus. I'm starting to feel inferior.
All right, put those away.
Yeah. That's I didn't get tickets to the gun show. Did you, House?
No, have you got a license for those?
Yeah.
Registered. Yeah.
Registered.
Yeah.
You're allowed to have them in America, not in Australia.
Yeah, he can carry. He can carry.
Yeah.
Especially in Kansas, it's constitutional carry. I don't even need a license.
Fair enough. Fair play. Fair play. Okay, so what's the story? How do you two know each other?
Matt, why don't you jump off? Let's talk about maybe how we connected and what was happening in your life at the time.
All right. So it would have been around November of 2016. I had slipped off into meth addiction again. And prior to that, I had gone all into a recovery house doing the 12 steps. And I'm a type of guy that does go all in. And so this time coming around, I set my own intervention. And when I told my partner at the time, she essentially said, "What do you expect me to do? Hold your fucking head and pick up the pieces?" And I went from being a pretty, like, you wouldn't have known I was really on meth unless I was open with you about it. I was what I would consider the day walker. I ran my business. I took care of my kids. I paid my bills. And as anybody in any form of addiction knows, it went fast. It went from a weekend to weekend to sitting at my desk going, how the hell did I get back here? And I knew at that time that I could not just go back and keep doing the same thing. I even set up a meeting to go back to the recovery house. I left the meeting. I just knew that there had to be another way. So the next 3 to 4 months, I tailspinned out of control. I now became what everybody in my small town thought I was. I fit the mold. I looked like your cliche tweaker at the time. But what I was doing was a ton of research. I was started looking up anything and everything I could find. I found Gabor Mate. I found Dr. Mark Lewis and Smart Recovery stuff. I even ran into Peter Levine and saw the word somatic, and I'm like, okay, that's too much for me. So I stuck kind of to REBT and CBT. And then there was just this regular guy, and his name was Ryan from the Melbourne Center for Healing. Back.
Sounds like a loser. Sounds like a fucking weirdo. Stay clear.
I like this. Like the sound of this guy. Keep going, Matthew.
Well, in fact, I was quite ambivalent between wanting to get clean, and of course, I was using at the time, so I was wanting to justify living a life like this for the rest of my life on meth, on ice. And Ryan happened to title a video "The Myths of Meth." And that one kind of hooked me in. And this guy, Ryan, for the first time, somebody else out there was articulating all of my thoughts, a lot of my feelings. And then on top of that, I reached out to him and he responded back. Now,
that's helpful.
But I mean, I don't think I would have got that from a Gabor Mate or something like that. So Ryan being where he was at his time and where I was at the time, it was just kind of meant to be.
Mm-hmm.
Online wasn't a big thing then. I mean, there wasn't Zoom or any of that. There was Skype. But I remember just constantly reaching out to Ryan about how do I get whatever kind of therapy you guys have or got. And the Center for Healing wasn't as open yet about their practice. It was more of Ryan's educational videos. So I still really had no idea what the therapy was. I finally got a hold of the president of Smart Recovery, and their office happened to be in my original hometown in San Diego, California. I can just keep going.
Well, I'm just curious. I'm going to jump in quickly because I'm curious. What age did you start using? What's how long had you been? And I don't even think you were struggling with addiction. It doesn't sound like, because you were a functioning meth user. As you said, you were paying your bills and holding down a job and raising kids and all that sort of stuff. So, what was it? What were you trying to achieve? Was there inner conflict? Did you want to get off meth completely, or did you want to just keep using meth in the background, or what was your goal? And how long have you been struggling with it for?
Okay, so that was 5 years ago. I would have been 30 years old. The progression started, I got discharged from the United States Marine Corps for cannabis use at the age of 19. There was my first self-sabotaging shame cycle. Mm-hmm. From there, I tried meth at the same age, but I never considered myself a user till the day I actually went and purchased my own supply. Mm-hmm. In fact, I would try to deceive myself and say I was never an addict of anything because I would just rotate through my substances. Be on cannabis for a while, go to alcohol for a while, a couple of pills. And meth was something that I only did when I flew out to California, which it's about 2,000 miles away from here, So I'd be out there visiting family for about a week, and I would say when in Rome. And then one day Rome followed me home.
Rome wasn't built in a day, was it?
So the full-blown meth use, a couple of things played into that. First was probation, and being on probation and corrections. Hell of a lot easier to flush that out than cannabis. I'm going to need 30 days to get that out of my system because it's fat soluble rather than water soluble. And then also with my partner, she can smell marijuana. She can smell alcohol on me. Didn't know shit about meth. So it was a lot easier to deceive. And being on probation, and which this is a whole subject on what's messed up with war on drugs and a lot of other stuff. But just the idea of using because I could get it out of my system quicker. And so full-blown use would have started around that time, actually. I had used a little bit here and there, but around that time, coupled with finally opening my own business and the ability to make money easily without having to listen or check in or to anybody, probably prolonged my meth use.
So there was no accountability, and there was no it sounds like it was quite easy for you, and that subterfuge to sort of mask it and just go along doing what you wanted to do with it all, really.
The only accountability in my life was wanting to be a better father.
Yeah, right. And what were you on probation for?
My third or fourth driving under the influence of alcohol.
Okay. So you weren't a badass like Ryan and sitting in jail, running away.
Well, it was a little more than 3 days or whatnot. My longest stint was only 90 days, but I cannot count how many times in my life I have fallen into a bucket of shit and come out smelling like roach. To have 5 DUIs and to have served my last 2 on 90-day house arrest stints is kind of unheard of.
Just on the dick there.
Most people go sit down for a year on that one.
It's interesting as well, that little phasia, and it's kind of the the lies we tell ourselves, and I've been there definitely, and so many people I've worked with. It's like, I'm not going to say that I'm addicted to something because I'm switching things. So it's like, no, I'm not addicted to anything, even though I'm using some sort of coping mechanism all the time. Yet there's these decisions that were being made were ones of, well, I'm going to take the drug that's going to be out of my system the soonest, so I'm going to be able to get past testing, which is this classic kind of deceitful is the word that you use. That's kind of that kind of deceitful behavior. So it's just that's an interesting moment, I think.
So I'm just you're painting a picture, and so I'm getting Hass's Center for Healing sort of in its infancy-ish.
We probably started at the start of 2016. So he's talking the end of 2016. So first year. So I was very. It's funny, we've spoken about this before, Matthew. I was just very, not that I'm not passionate now, I'm clearly very passionate, but I was that. Remember when you knew, Nick? Were you the same? Like when you first started, you were like,
you were fired up, dude.
I was so fired up, and I was rough and I was raw, but I was just thought I could change the world, And it's like, and that was great because it kind of reached certain people like Matthew and resonated on the other side of the world. And that's why when he messaged me, I just messaged back. I can't remember what I said, but probably like, yeah, mate, what are you going through? Let's talk about it,
Absolutely.
So the systems you got in place and the courses and the programs and everything you got in place now weren't back then. So, it was sort of like the new frontier. And so Matt's reached out and got in touch and said, I need some help. What angle did you come at it from?
Now, Matt, you jump in here because you probably remember a bit better than me, but it was a process, right? So
Right.
he might have reached out. I can't remember whether it was on socials or email. So we just were having a bit of back and forward, and he was kind of letting me know what was happening with him, and I was offering some advice here and there. But like you said, Nick, that we weren't really doing anything online back then. We were doing just our in-person stuff. And it took, you can let us know, Matt. I can't remember how long. I don't know if it was a year or how long it was before we actually sat down for a session on Skype.
Close to 2.5 to 3 years.
Was it? Oh, Jesus.
Yeah, it actually started out with, so
Left him hanging, Hass.
Wait, no, but he left me hanging, because you tell the story about how you sabotaged that first session. So what happened?
Well,
Sorry, let me jump in. So what happened, Nick,
right.
after this back and forward, right? Where I'm chatting, giving advice here and there. And then I think maybe, Melissa had done a Skype session with someone in Malaysia. So I'm like, oh, we can do it online, but I was very resistant. So I said to Matthew, I'm like, all right, fuck it. Let's do a session. When are you available? Right. We're going to jump on Skype. And so we organized a day or time. And then Matthew, you take over from here.
It was literally when it was time, and I think I like re-upped on one of my biggest purchases. And
What's that mean?
I went and bought probably like a gram's worth or 8 balls worth of meth.
Right.
Instead of the session, he receives a video of me like apologizing and smashing my meth pipe.
He sabotaged the session, Nick, is what he's saying.
It was like I want to be in a relationship. I want to, but it was just like I don't feel I'm ready to be in a relationship yet, and I'm not ready to commit to the relationship yet. So
and he wasn't at that moment, you know.
Well,
and I think that's an important thing for listeners to get their head around as well. You know, the work a client and practitioner doing it is a relationship, and so we've got the discovery session. For me, I call that a first date with people. Before we jump into bed, let's have a first date. Seriously, and let's get to know one another. What
are you doing down there, Nico? Whining and dining,
cucumbers and
movies,
cucumbers and all sorts of. So it sounds like you two weren't ready. The timing wasn't right, or Matthew hadn't come to terms with the fact that being in a relationship would be the best thing for him.
Look, tell me if I'm wrong here, Matt.
I'd like to backtrack. My addiction wasn't necessarily to the meth. That was just whatever the symptom was. My addiction was a pattern of self-sabotage. If we rewind and I say 19, cannabis discharged from the United States Marine Corps after being raised by an uncle in Hawaii at a Marine base, that is all I ever wanted to be. So my story is a pattern of massive self-sabotages. Like, you're not going to outdo me. I'm going to fucking do one up on you.
You mean using meth was more a symptom or a form of medication to alleviate some sort of internal suffering that was going on? How interesting. Are we recording this?
This is groundbreaking, Nick.
This is gold. This is gold.
Yeah,
Keep going.
It got to help reinforce the story that I'm alone, and that was my true addiction.
But that was actually such an important moment, Matthew, because we kind of, I said to you, look, we're going to do this bloody session on Skype, and that kind of pushed you into a really uncomfortable space where, you sabotage it, but you also kind of had this breakdown, which I believe was a very important moment for you actually breaking through.
Right. I've heard bits and parts of your guys' story, and I feel like I was a really self-aware man. Even in college at 18, I had known the source of abandonment and this and that. So to go on another 11 plus years, 12, 13 years of knowing everything up here. I went to college for psychology. Shortly after that, I became a smart recovery facilitator. So I've always been enamored by human behavior. And when Ryan said, I remember sending him a long audio explaining my abandonment story. And he did catch me completely off guard when he's like, let's fucking take care of this shit now. Let's take care of it. Like, wait, what?
And that's confronting it is such a hard step, isn't it?
It is. And also, I had no idea what we were getting into. I'm like, what are you going to do that's different? I had no idea how a session was going to go with him. There was no information out like his site has now. You know, there wasn't root cause therapy, wasn't formulated to where they were training people yet. If you guys will allow me to rewind to that moment with the self-set intervention and accountability, it truly was my children. I remember standing there with a friend in my apartment, and I'm looking at a photo almost like this of me and my kids, but I'm now with my partner, and we had been together off and on since I was 14. And we had never had a family photo. And like in a month, we were supposed to be doing our first ever family photo. She had, we had one child together, my third, and she was about 6 months pregnant with my fourth child. And I did not want to go down the street at all and tell her I was struggling. And it was just staring at that photo on the wall and imagining it that got me to go down there. And what got me to eventually go out to California to practical recovery with Tom Horvath was a restraining order had been put on me against my children. And Father's Day was coming up, 2017. So I wasn't going to be allowed to be around my 4 children. And the day that restraining order came on, I remember standing in my apartment, and it looked like a fucking dump, trash everywhere, just a mess, like a tweaker's mess. An apartment that I once took so much pride in that like you could eat out of the toilet. And I remember in that moment realizing there is no drug on this earth that can take away this pain. And I didn't want to live anymore. And I went out to California, and one of the dangers, I understand that the 12 steps can be very beneficial for some people. But then there are some people like me who, when you start to become indoctrinated by some dogmatic practices, I was also a pastor's kid. So bam, big collision there, a lot of shit going on. They tell you that you can't change for anybody else. But I didn't give a shit about myself enough to ever want to change for me. I could care less about me. Whatever. If it was just me and I didn't have my kids, of course, I'll never know, but I would guess that I'd probably still be twacked out. And I remember sitting there with that counselor, and I was very afraid to even tell him, because in that recovery house, we had big house meetings, 60, 80 guys with the leader there, and somebody would relapse or be struggling, and he would be asking why you want to change, and they would say my children, my wife, and he would literally go off like, fuck, no, you don't. You've never wanted to change for them. You keep making mistakes. So I remember being very afraid to even tell this therapist, you know, the only reason I want to change is for my kids. I remember like I was so broken at the time telling him this. When he looked at me and said, sounds like good enough motivation for me, that was all the permission I needed. Of course, I had some relapses, and then Ryan and I finally connected and did a healing session. But that, yeah, there's a lot there. Anyway, I kind of.
No, it's good. It's an interesting.
What are your thoughts
sure
on that, Nick? Like about the, people saying, because for me, it's like, yeah, you do have to want to change yourself. But then a lot of people, if it's like, I want to change for my kids, and that is the motivation to start working on yourself, but then you work out kind of early on that, I need to become a better man internally to be better for my kids. So they're very intertwined, aren't they?
I think the kids' motivation is like the spark in the engine, and that gets the engine going. But then it has to come back to, I've been doing so much work with clients lately about self-care and self-compassion and self-love, and you can't give away that which you don't possess. You can't love others unconditionally until you love yourself unconditionally. You can't love in a healthy non-ego, non-attached way until you can, everything starts at home. It's not just charity. So yeah, I think whatever gets you up and going is a great source of motivation. But yeah, when we become better within ourselves, we become better fathers, better parents, better husbands, better sons, better everything, but for me, it all always comes back to we are the source. So, because we're handing down these emotional family heirlooms to these kids, and they're looking at us for guidance. They're looking at, okay, well, what do I do when I don't get what I want, or when things don't go my way? Right, I have a tantrum, or I have a this, or I put myself down. Fuck, I'm an idiot. Geez, I'm such a loser. If you're treating yourself that way, but trying to raise healthy kids, I was never good at math at school, but even to me, that math doesn't add up. So
I would completely agree. I mean, I had my own philosophy that, I hated myself so much that I believed wholeheartedly that it was better to be absently absent rather than presently absent. What's that mean? I'd rather be gone and then I'd be a mystery to my kids than be present and out of my mind and not really there. Or, today all you need is a cell phone and presently absent.
Yeah.
Well, you probably think you're doing less damage by not being around, but because we're not causing these emotional splinters. We're not harming them on a daily basis, but the absence can be equally, if not more.
It's really important for people to understand, though, because we've spoken about it, Nick, when we've spoken about suicide on the podcast before, and
I'm not saying my philosophy was right, is all I'm saying. I'm saying that was my philosophy in my mindset then. I was on drugs, obviously. My mind wasn't all there.
But that's it. But it's great to get a snapshot into that mindset because, like I said, Nick, with suicide and people go, how can you do that? How could you, leave these people behind? But even in that moment, it's like someone's in so much pain and so much self-hatred, that it makes sense to them that everyone will be better off if I'm gone. Yeah, it's just important to understand that mindset because until we understand what people are going through in these really tough situations, we're going to judge their decisions as opposed to having compassion for them.
So I look at everything as a spectrum and have a think about taking your own life because you don't want to keep harming or being a burden to people. That's at one extreme of the spectrum. At the other end of the spectrum, it's like, I've had a bad day. I don't want to go home and talk to my partner about it. There's so much of this. I don't want to be a burden. I don't want to put this on you. So if we can, get better at practicing that, I think it's much healthier.
Well, to use Nick's lingo, it was a cognitive distortion, obviously, but that resonates with me completely that in those moments, it was a very real. There's no meme out there or cute little fucking thing on the internet that says, hey, if somebody's saying that they want to commit suicide, it's manipulation and they just want attention. That's all good and well. But the truth is people commit suicide. Okay. And so for me in those moments, being a chronic relapser, chronically my life sabotaging over and over, it was 100% real in the moment. I may not have actually taken the action or even could have taken the action, but the feeling of not wanting to live or completely disappear out of my loved ones' lives forever was very real because the effort that I would put in to get my life back on track wasn't a facade. It was all in. I was all in to get my life back on track. And then for it to just fucking go sideways, well, I don't have control over myself then. So it's time to go.
So we talk about different versions of us. And so that version of Matthew back then was adamant. He fully, wholeheartedly believed that he wanted to get his life back on track. But, he's not waking up tomorrow. He's going to sleep and processing, and a new version's waking up in the morning. So there's this other version that wakes up and goes, you know what? Today, I don't believe I'm worth having a life. So I'm going to sabotage it. So it's so it can be so conflicting when we look at ourselves as as our identity or as a whole and go, I made that decision. Well, yeah, no, a version of you made that decision, and he fully believed it. He fully bought into it at the time. But, 2 days later, it was a completely different version going, no, that guy was mad. This is fucked. I'm out.
And hence the ambivalence in so many of us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's very true. Very true. Matt, what don't you tell us about what you can remember about that first session we did a while ago now?
Well, for any of the listeners that may know a little bit of Ryan's story, vulnerability wasn't really one of my issues. Neither was emotions or tears. However, I could only be vulnerable about stuff that was past tense. I could never be vulnerable about shit I was presently going through, ever. And in that session, we worked, I guess I would boil it down to, I don't know how to boil it down without using too many listeners, but I can say for the first time in my life, I realized how universal that feeling was, that I am alone. And if it is so universal, then I can be okay with it. And I've got kids to let them deal with it and help them deal with it.
It's interesting how lonely people can feel when they have other people in their lives, isn't it? When they have relationships, but they can but they're not engaged fully in those relationships, or they don't believe that they belong in those relationships. So it's being around people doesn't mean that you aren't lonely. It's just that the loneliness is such an internal experience.
Yeah, there's an actual study done on that. It's it might be in Lost Connections, Johan Hari's book, but there's like the top loneliness expert who's done a lot of research and dedicated his life to it, and he found that, yeah, exactly like you say, Nick, the feeling of loneliness actually has nothing to do. There's no correlation with the amount of people that you're around. You can be in a sea of people and feel incredibly lonely.
And we've got the 5 fundamentals, and the second one is basic human needs by Dr. William Glasser, and he talks about one of those needs is a sense of belonging. And so when I'm working with clients, I'm like, if I think once again, it starts at home. If you can connect with yourself, if you have a sense of belonging with you, and you can identify and be at peace with your own existence, then it's so much easier to be in healthy relationships with others. You can be by yourself for days and not feel lonely if you're connected internally. Or if you're not connected internally, you can be surrounded by people for days and feel really lonely. So
yeah, and I think when you said that belonging, and I'm sort of triggering my memory now as well, Matthew, in that session, and whatever we worked on, and it was this feeling of being alone, but you were able to see that the people in your life, in your past and now, also had struggled with those feelings, and then realized everyone had struggled with those feelings at some point. So we talk about, it's kind of like this belonging now, because when I feel I'm alone, I'm isolated. It's me. And when we think everyone else is, they're all having a great time. Life's real easy for everyone else, but I'm fucked. And then also we say, everybody struggles with I am alone. So then it's like, I feel really connected and feel like I belong to that kind of universal network of people who are struggling with real human issues.
Well, I do remember it clearly. I just didn't want to go into it with everyone. But when, like my story, at the age of 18, I had already moved 21 times, lived in 4 states, lived with 8 different family members or sets of family members. So the I am alone was really reinforced. I remember being in a relationship and asking my partner if they had felt that. And I was confounded that they said, no, I don't feel a sense of alone in my life. I'm like, what? People don't, what? But today I told Ryan earlier, there was a reason I sent you guys that quote was it really popped up. My cheek hit my Audible app while I was on the phone, and Peter Levine's Waking the Tiger came up, and the chapter was on community, trauma, and healing. And that was the very beginning of the chapter. And, you know, I guess at the end of the day, I feel like it's the Western society that pushes so much of the, well, you've got to be good to be alone first. And that codependency is this horrible fucking thing. But to be honest, we've lost community in our Western society. If it wasn't for the online community that I have with Ryan and you guys in Australia, I would still feel probably a magnified sense of aloneness in this town of 6,000 people.
This is where it comes back to that tribal thing, and that we don't feel like we belong. You know, I moved a lot as a kid as well, and I know that caused issues for me. I wasn't raised in a village. You know, it takes a village to raise a child, sort of thing. And so that constant shifting and moving, I don't believe I probably developed as someone who has that more consistency developed. So, you know, I used to steal shit and give it away to people just to make friends, you know, and that was my way of trying to hey, look, I am of value. I am a value.
Yeah.
I have something to offer. I am a good person. You can like me. That was you know, my offering.
I remember
offering
I remember being in jail, Nick, and you're not supposed to be nice or given in jail. And that need still existed for me in jail, to where you could order commissary, get snacks, and everyone's hoarding their shit. And I'm handing out candy like, hey, guys, like me.
You're like Oprah in jail. You can have some candy.
You have some.
But it's amazing. And so when you feel that sense of belonging, like I got a client at the moment. He's 21 and really struggled with ice and meth and whatnot. And all of a sudden, you know, he kept bouncing and really rough childhood. And he's sort of in and out of jobs. And he's finally landed a job with a group of dudes who he said they're normal. And he goes, they treat me normally. And it's so nice just to feel normal, to fit in, just to you know, be accepted. You know, they've accepted him into their tribe, and without judgment, without any conditions or anything. It's just cool. You're one of us now. And that sense of belonging, to feel included, is really important. But I think it's that, you know, codependency for me is problematic when it goes for too long. We're after sort of interdependency, where we can lean on each other when necessary, but we're growing individually within ourselves. But yeah, you're right, leaning out, reaching out, getting some help and support is really important. But if you need that in order to be okay, then it becomes problematic, because you live in this constant state of anxiety. Oh, but what if, you know, subconsciously, like, but what if this person leaves me? You can't leave me. So it's a very attached, sort of needy relationship. So
yeah, the way you
and that's
to actually be able to depend on each other, I've heard it like an H instead of an A. You know, as long as the relationship's interdependent and you're taking turns, there's going to be times, obviously, in a healthy relationship where you're weaker and they're stronger, and also in many different categories and facets of life where you're going to bounce back.
Well, it's give and take. It's, you know, the husband can work, the woman's going to stay home, so she's going to rely on him for financial support, but he's going to rely on her. So it is, we talk about the H model as well, H for healthy interdependent relationship, because that codependency, there's no room for growth, where that healthy one, you can both off you go.
Matt, I'd love you to talk about
off you go, geezer.
Off you go, geezer. I'd like you to talk about, maybe, you know, you mentioned that you live in a small town there, and maybe some of the reactions of your transformation and the changes that you've made in your life from some people in the community, and even, some law enforcement that I know you've kind of mentioned a few stories to me before. One, to highlight how much you've changed, but also maybe to highlight as well kind of still how society sees a lot of these issues.
Yeah, this plays really well into, it may have been your last episode on changes in polarity, about how you guys were saying maybe 3 months, at least for a close family. Well, living in a town like this, you need 5 years. You need 5 years, legit. Let's see. I had the police come over it was a miscommunication, but one thing that I've been working on is some stored anger. And Ryan had me going out to the country where it was isolated, not my backyard. One time it was my backyard and the cops showed it. But it at least presented an opportunity for the police. They're asking, they're making sure everything's good. And as they're leaving, one of them just, hey, everyone kind of knows your story. Can I just ask how you got off of meth? And I kind of went into, first off, if I believed it was a disease, I'd probably still have a pipe in my hand. I had to believe in complete healing and completely moving forward. Not that I was broken and had a disease. But yeah, with school just starting up, today was the first day of school. I still run into people that, oh, you look really good. You look healthy. I still got people kind of holding their breath. Since January, I've lost 40 pounds. I started going to the
looking
gym.
terrific.
Looking terrific, by the way. Fantastic. God, if you're listening, get on YouTube and do yourself a favor.
Yeah, well,
drink it in.
If you're a former meth addict, I suppose it'd be like if you were an alcoholic for a long time and you got your life completely changed and you were walking and stumbled up the stairs. Everyone's going to have, what is he? So
really good example. Really good example. Yeah.
You lose 40 pounds in a town like this, but like I said, it's 108/42, whatever the rest of the world says. And I work outside for a living. Yeah, I've cut weight and I started going to the gym. It started with just, sometimes I would show up and leave, not even work out. But I had to get in the routine of getting up in the morning. Sometimes it would be like a little 15-minute jog. That's it. Sometimes it would be pulling into the parking lot and like, oh shit, there's people here. Never mind. I'm pull away because I like to work out alone. But yeah, that's a little bit of a rough situation. And it does have a lot to do with knowing who you are on the inside and kind of not giving a shit what other people are thinking.
I guess you condition those around us as well, and they have associations. They see you stumbling upstairs when you're on meth. So even if it's been a year or whatnot, it's going to trigger a memory in them, and they're going to create that link, that association back to it and go, oh, is on meth again? They're going to jump to that conclusion instead of going up to you going, hey, and are you okay? They're just going to naturally go into that distorted state and start looking at you through that distorted lens and go, oh no, he's back on it. Worst case scenario, here we go.
But that's it. That's the way society views it, though, isn't it? Like, it's yes, that association, but it's also this idea that we have that, oh, they're a meth addict. Oh, that's it. That's it. They have that for life.
The stereotype.
Especially because law enforcement and magistrates, I've been through that system doing 2 days of hard time. I love how over all the episodes, my 2 days has turned into 3 now. So we're going to see if we can push it out to a week by the end of the year.
It's like catching a fish. It was that big. Yeah.
We'll be doing the podcast in like 2050, and it'll be like, yeah, I did like 6 months in solitary confinement. Had to, escape using some device. Anyway, so especially
I want to stress the importance of community, and like having you guys even, and just, if I only had this 6,000 population town, my heart breaks for some of the people in these small towns that don't have resources out there, or don't know about the resources, or just ignorant to them. I'm pretty sure that if I was only, that's also why I went out to California. I didn't have any family supporting me here. So when I flew out and was with my aunt, I only went to that one therapist meeting, and I was able to stay clean. It might not sound like a long time to normal people, but for 90 days, that's pretty good for a meth addict. And all that I needed was the maternal love and nurturing from my aunt that had raised me for 2 years when I was a little boy. And I'm trying to come with her with my shame. It's no, there's no time for that. You're just here to, just showering me with love. And I think about a lot of these people in this town. I had a court hearing that I had to be on, but it was on Zoom. So I got to be blacked out and muted while I listened to this woman who failed a meth test and got her kid taken from her. And I can only imagine all the shame someone like that's going through. And then if you're in a small town, an unsupported community, like I said in my story, I was a pretty successful meth addict until I told people about my struggles. And then I became what they, in their minds, almost thought I should be. Community's been huge to me. Having the right community has really,
I think a lot of the time people use the coping mechanisms as their community. We're talking about not having that sense of belonging. I talk about when I was doing a lot of hypnotherapy early in my career and helping people to stop smoking, and we'd look at cigarettes and as a person, and okay, you're in a relationship with this person, so you need to explore the dynamic of that relationship again, instead of just quitting or going cold turkey or just breaking up with that person. It's like a really sort of sitting with it and going, what am I getting out of this relationship? And so often people will be like, smoking is my best friend. Smoking's been here in my life for smoking is my longest friend. It's been there for 15 years. It's always there when I need it. I can go to it. I can turn to it anytime I need to. Yeah, okay, it's slowly killing me and poisoning me and really toxic and unhealthy, but I'm very codependent on that because it's the one stable, it's the one constant thing in my life. So whether it's cigarettes or gambling or alcohol or crack or meth or cucumbers, whatever the case may be, you're gonna turn to that which is consistent, I think.
Consistent is the word. I wrote a blog earlier. I wrote it while I was still using, I think, and then released it later. But it was called My Mates, Ice and GHB. And I wrote how I literally saw them as friends. And one of the key lines in that was, they'll never judge me. Right? Because you got to imagine, like Matthew, that lady you're talking about in court who just had the kids taken off her, the incredible amount of guilt and shame you have from that, right? And then all of a sudden, the judicial system tells you you're a terrible parent. And then the people in your community, this is why I love it. Community is so important in a positive or negative way. All the people in the community just go, they don't want to look too deep. So look at the surface and go, what a piece of shit mother she is. She's choosing the drug over her son or daughter. The heaviness of that pushes that person to use more, and it becomes a self-perpetuating cycle that so many people find themselves in.
It's hard to stop and ask a question. That's why people take the easy path. It's so much easier just to sit there and judge. It's so much easier just to look at someone and for the ego to get involved and to form an opinion than it is to sort of stop. And like I had it last night, there was a dude on his motorbike on the side of the road, and people were just going past, and I was like, there's this dude coming. I have to go, right, can I stop you? It was this actual a process, and I pulled up and I was like, you're right, mate. He's like, yeah, and I ran out of petrol, got no money. And I'm like, okay, I'll give you a hand. So it was harder for me to stop, but it helped somebody. And the dude behind me started beeping because I was holding up traffic. I'm trying to help someone. He's like, fucking hurry up, stop being nice.
I've got somewhere to be, can't get out of the way. Yeah. This is this disconnected digital world we're in. It's like this basic kindness of human-to-human interaction is kind of a weird thing now that other people get pissed off at.
But you talk to naturists and everything like that, and it's all about this interdependency, and you're not alone. We are all so connected. We're never alone. Even if it's just on a molecular level, even if it's just we're part of the universe, we are intrinsically, energetically, we are all connected. So this is if we stop looking at ourselves as individuals and can get back to that community sort of spirit, and that's someone's struggling, can I help you? And I said to this dude, he's like, oh, thanks so much. I was like, no worries, dude, just pay it forward the next time you get a chance, and that happened to me. I was traveling through Southeast Asia on my way home from Europe, and the taxi that took me there sped off with my bag in it and all my money and everything. I lucky I had my plane ticket on me, and I was just sitting in the lounge, and I went out to the smoking area, and this was in like 2003, I think. And this Aussie guy goes, "You right, mate?" And I was like, "Oh no, I just got on my shit stolen. I just bum a smoke." And he just hands me $100 note and goes, "Go and buy yourself a beer and a pack of smokes." And I said, "Dude, that's too much. It's He goes, "No, this is my opportunity. This happened to me 15 years ago in the outback, and it's my chance to pay it forward." I'm like, "Fuck, man, that's awesome. Thank you." And that memory is still so vivid. That act of kindness, that act of compassion, that act of community spirit stayed with me. And what was that, 2002? This is 20 years later. I've passed on a lot of times since then, but I still got to pass it on last night and then educate someone else to pass it on. So
I love that. That's so beautiful. I had one, you're making me remember now, not long after I got clean. And what happens with a lot of people in addiction, they start to get clean and all of a sudden they have to deal with the realities of the shitstorm they created during their addiction.
So I had clean up the mess.
So I had all these, debts. Like I'd maxed out credit cards. I hadn't paid fucking speeding tickets and all that for ages. So it's like you're trying to then get your life together. It can be overwhelming. And I remember calling up, I had these with the bank, all these debts, and I'm like, I can pay these back. So they went through to like a financial hardship company, and this guy in Adelaide, in a different state where I am. I remember speaking to him on the phone, and I'm like, I'm never going to be able to get this sorted out. And anyway, he got on the phone, and he's just from this financial hardship joint. He goes, "Oh, tell me your story, mate. Tell me what's going on." And I'm like, "Look, I was addicted to ice. I had all this stuff. I was dealing, blah blah, and I've come out of it now. And I'm trying to deal with life, and I'm studying to help people and that kind of thing." And he's like, "Mate, you're a bloody inspiration. Let me see what I can do." And he went and on his computer and he goes, "Look, mate, I've worked it out. You don't have to make any payments for the next 6 months. And then when you do, we're going to get you on this long term." He just went above and beyond to help me. And he goes, "Mate, I can't believe what you've done. Keep doing what you're doing." And I got off the phone. I was like crying. I was just so happy. And I'm like, and it's left such an imprint on me, like that guy did with you, Nick, that I was like, I want to bring that energy to people, that I deal with in the future. It's beautiful. It's human.
The smile on this kid's face last night on the motorbike is like, I've got no money. I can't believe it. I said, "It's okay. You don't need, it's just, I'm giving this to you." It just looked completely foreign. It was like I was speaking Swahili.
Yeah. It's like, what do you want in return? What do I have to do? Nothing, mate.
Yeah.
Nothing.
Yeah. It's called compassion and kindness. Just accept it. That's all you need to do.
I know it's weird, but just accept it. Matthew, I want to go on, mate. Do you have something to say?
But yeah, I'm looking at the calendar, and it's the 12th for me here, and that is, I've lost track, but now that I see it, that's 90 days off of all social media for me. Not an ounce of social media. All my accounts are deactivated. And I wanted to talk about, as Ryan's saying, the spectrums, or Nick, the spectrums, or double-edged swords, or two sides of the coin of everything. And what I've learned so far in 90 days of no social media is, well, one, I feel like all my thoughts are genuinely my own. That's been refreshing.
Yeah, that's nice, isn't it?
Two is, I was even thinking about it today, how quickly in these online communities, Facebook or whatnot, that we can feel like we know someone almost too much to where we don't want to be around them. I was thinking about some of the people in this small town over the last 2 years that I had even unfriended and didn't want to deal with. And now that I'm not on social media for 90 days and have no idea about anybody's life, and they don't know about my life over the last 90 days, I thought, wow, isn't that weird? Because if I was to run into that person now and life was like this and nobody had Facebook like I've experienced for the last 90 days, it wouldn't have these preset judgments that, oh, well, you have your opinion on this about coronavirus or this about the vaccine, so go fuck yourself. Instead, it's just, hey, how you doing, dude?
What's been
How's life
happening?
been?
Yeah,
Good to see you. It's been so long since I've seen you.
It's a beautiful example, Matty, of okay, we get too much information, we become closed-minded because it bumps up against our biases or our opinions or our judgments or our beliefs, and we go, no, that's different to mine. I'm going to close my mind off to that. But when we don't have all that information, that stimulus hitting us, we actually become open-minded and curious. And we're like, oh, I haven't seen you for a while. Well, how's life? Well, I wonder what are you up to these days? What's going on? And we actually go seeking to engage instead of retreating to disconnect. And it's so much healthier. So that's
I was
awesome.
just thinking about how the social media platforms and community-wise have both given me community, and now I can see how it has hurt community. Both. And I started out doing this just wanting a break from my own bullshit because sometimes I can get reactive and post something. Maybe it's the Gemini in me, I don't know, but I'm like, okay, all right, I need a break from this. And I was sick of everyone's negativity. But now I've only just started, but I'm staying off of it until I'm completely done with my book. And when I'm done with my book is when I'll be back online. I just feel like I just don't want any other outside influence where I was saying my thoughts feel like my own now, you know, so.
Yeah, it's so true, isn't it?
It's a nice cleanse. It sounds like a nice cleanse and a nice reset.
It is. Cleanse is the right word.
But the best way to test your relationships is to go without it for a while and sort of, if there's no nutritional value in it and we go without it for a while, if it doesn't feed our soul and we sort of look at it and go, I just don't need that anymore. And that's nice. And
so nice.
Yeah,
it is. Look, we're coming up on an hour, man. I think it's the best place to finish up here is, there's been a couple of themes that have been coming up in the chat today. There'll be people listening who are struggling in certain aspects of their life and maybe struggling to find any community and connection as well and feeling quite isolated, whether they're in a small town like you or they're in a big city but still feeling that isolation. Knowing that, obviously one size doesn't fit all and everyone's got their own journey, what advice would you have for someone who's struggling with some of those things?
I think my overall advice would be don't let anyone else write your story. As in, if you feel like you're in the wrong community, if you feel like you're getting information, whether it's from an online community or an in-person community, don't ever stop seeking out the right community for you, and you'll know it is going to hit your mind, your body. Literally, your community will resonate with you. I guess that's what I got.
Yeah.
Can I add to that? That's awesome. And don't be afraid to leave a community. Like there's so many people stay in unhealthy communities out of this sense of I need to belong to a community and out of this fear of if I leave this, they're going to judge me or they're going to say X, Y, Z about me. But
and your community might just be your family. It might be your friends. It might be a job. Don't be afraid to stop seeking until you find the right one. I've plenty of times I've stayed at a job that the job sucked, but the community was great. So I stayed.
Yeah. So true.
Well, it sounds like we can't have our cake and eat it too. So got there in the end, the little idiom. How else are you meant to eat a cake if you don't have it? I don't understand that.
I can't believe that's the one you picked. That one drives me fucking nuts. I've never understood it. What does it even mean? Why do we say this one? Have your cake and eat it too. Like
it's like the first person that said it was living in Scotland in 1384. And
listen, he's got to try Scotland out there.
Yeah, yeah, it was some ancestor McNutt.
Yeah,
That's right.
There was the McNutts and the Sutherlands were having dinner one night,
Fucking
and
Earl.
someone pulled out a cake, and Mrs. McNutt went, "Oh, I'm gonna die. I can't have my cake and eat it too." That's just, and then the Sutherlands looked at her like, "What the fuck does that mean?"
So
And they went to war.
she made the cake, maybe. So she made
Yeah.
the cake, but then she didn't want to have a slice of her own cake because she was on a diet.
Mm.
And maybe that's why it annoys you so much, Matthew. Maybe it's a genealogical trauma from an ancestor.
I think you're right.
Epigenetics, mate. You got to get in there and change your DNA.
Well, I know it's a subject for another day, but I've always found it interesting that for so many people, whatever their biggest traumas were, that a lot of times they could spend their life trying to build the opposite. So what do I mean is, I've got 8 kids and my 9th on the way, a son. So I'll have 3 boys and 3 girls and 3.
You really didn't want to be alone, did you?
So literally my life's mission, right or wrong, but what drives me now is creating a community and a family, a place for these kids that they can always come to, because even as an adult, it's easy to not feel like I have family. So I guess I want to give them, which so many of us do in our lives, especially when we become parents, is we just don't want to do to our kids what happened to us. And
a lot of the time it comes from an aversion and a desire. I didn't have that, so I'm going to create an abundance of that. And so if I didn't have family, I'm going to create fucking 9 kids. Wow, hat off to
you. Matthew, I really appreciate you. I appreciate our friendship over the years. Consider you a brother from another mother. Once our criminal records get wiped, we'll be able to actually visit. Oh, actually, that's probably not the biggest issue. It's probably COVID's causing the travel issue at the minute. But we will eventually meet in person, I'm sure. If this podcast was a cake, then I've gobbled up the whole thing. And really appreciate you coming on.
Well, hey, thank you. And thanks for all the work that you guys do. I know that it has helped impact my life. And so thank you.
Much love to you, brother. We appreciate you. And listeners, I hope you've enjoyed this as much as we have. And we'll speak to you all soon, and we'll see you next week. Nico, pleasure as always.
Well, shout out to the Woke Bloke community and the Woke Bloke family, and thanks everyone for listening and being a part of that family. And we should create a way where everyone can start connecting or reach out. Maybe a Facebook group that Matt can run because he's so heavily invested in social media or something.
Yeah, it'll be up in about a year.
No, we can't create a social media Woke Blokes group, because then Matt will feel excluded because he's not in it, and then he'll feel alone again, and it'll trigger him, and he'll be fucking back on meth in 6 months.
What are we going to do then? What are we going to do? We have to create something else.
We're going to have to do pen pals.
Go
old school again. Go old school.
Can't wait to get your letter in a month or two then.
Yeah. But like Nick said, this is a community, and reach out if you're listening to this and you maybe haven't thought, hey, I can actually message these guys. Shoot us a DM on Instagram or something.
You said we got a message last night, didn't you? So we've been getting a few messages of people saying thanks, and this is how it's helped, and I've shared it with my husband or someone else. So thanks everyone for sharing the love.
Yeah, we love you all, and we love you, Matthew.
Love you long time.